there, readers, writers, and friends. Story Serpent here, and today we're talking about Pages&Co, The Bookwanderers by Anna James. It's a contemporary middle-grade fantasy. It was published in 2018 by HarperCollins Children's UK. It was then published in 2019 in the United States by Philomel Books, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House, same as HarperCollins. But then it was re-released in 2020 under the Puffin imprint, which should tell you they didn't have a ton of faith in this book until they found it had a United States audience, at which point they re-released it under the Puffin Children's Classics title. But before we get into all of that, today's random words are like, share, subscribe, hoodwinked. So, what does this book here have to say about itself? Ever since her mother's disappearance, 11-year-old Tilly Pages has found comfort in the stories at Pages&Co, her grandparents' bookshop. But when her favorite characters, Anne of Green Gables and Alice from Wonderland, start showing up at the shop, Tilly's adventures become very real. Not only can she follow Anne and Alice into their books, she discovers she can wander into any story she chooses. Tilly's surprising new ability leads her to fun and exciting adventures, but danger may be lurking on the very next page. When new secrets are uncovered, it's up to Tilly to solve the mystery of what happened to her mother all those years ago. From debut author Anna James comes an enchanting story about the magic of books and the power of imagination. Doesn't that sound like so much fun? If you have ever had a personal experience with Alice in Wonderland, which is culturally ubiquitous, everybody has, that little thing about Alice in Wonderland that they love. They've got a character they identify with a little bit. It's totally part of our cultural zeitgeist. And Anne, who doesn't love Anne with an E? If you don't have a cherished place in your heart for Anne of Green Gables, you haven't read it yet, you need to get on that. So everything that this is telling us about what we're setting up for the show. Okay, so we've got a mystery about her mother's disappearance. Now, we're told that ever since her mother disappeared, Tilly has found comfort in these stories. But we find out early in the story that Tilly's mother disappeared when she was still a baby. So already I can tell you the back cover is lying to you. We're also told that this story is enchanting. It's a big word. This book clearly feels very, very good about itself. And when, as you can see from the front cover, we're invoking Holmes with the pipe and the hat. We've got our delightful little stack of teacups here. Ooh, treasure chest, little drink me bottle. Right, they're pulling out all of the Anglophile things that they know us USers just can't help but love. They definitely know their audience in terms of how to package this. As far as what we know from the trappings, we've got lovely little title page here, and a ton of super delightful illustrations. The larger ones, actually, the ones that I found the most charming were the smaller ones, littered throughout the book. I feel like they did a wonderful job of incorporating what was happening in the story, but some of these larger illustrations got a little muddy for me. They're a little dark, so it's hard to distinguish between the books. It doesn't quite match up with the sort of serendipitous, whimsical feel that the cover is going for. But other than that, our illustrator, Paula Escobar, did a great job. No shade to her and her illustrations. They were really delightful. And in fact, her illustrations do a wonderful job of telling us immediately who the bad guy is. And the way she depicts him here even gives us a hint as to his nature, as his edges aren't the firmest. He's depicted in kind of this sketchy way, which hints at a lot of what's going on in the book, which I appreciated. The paperback copy that I have here, I actually bought books 1 and 2, buy one get one half off at Barnes & Noble. Again, when they do that, that usually means we've got stock we've got to get rid of. But I went ahead and picked up the paperback, and as you can see, I have ripped the cover, and I don't know if this comes through on camera, but I broke the binding. You'll find out why later, but despite having a fully broken binding, The book is still holding together really well, so good job on the print quality there. So let's talk about the prose. What's working? Honestly, in terms of the prose, most things are working. I found exactly one typo, and it was just a statement that had a question mark at the end because it was being posed kind of like a question, which I don't like that. If you're making a statement, make the statement, put the period at the end. But that's, most people probably wouldn't even consider that a typo. They'd consider that a stylistic choice. They're still wrong. And as far as her language goes, James is doing a great job, especially with her metaphors and her similes. Take this bit, for example. Their house was full of laughter and music and conversation, but Tilly could hear the silence where her mother should be, like an orchestra without a cello section. And the book is littered with these wonderful little metaphors that middle grade readers especially love because they understand those comparisons, and it makes them feel really smart. It makes them feel like, oh, I'm in on this thing that's happening, this comparison that this, very fancy grown-up is making. I get it. And it helps them feel like they're a good reader, and it helps them enjoy the story more. I know my middle grade readers, the number of times my kid will be like, Mom, you got to hear this simile. They're really excited about it. Now, that might be because they're my kid, but I have a feeling that most child readers are going to enjoy that. The first line might not be super hooky. Matilda Pages pushed open the door of Pages&Co. and breathed in deeply, taking in the familiar scent of just blown out candles, dark chocolate, and of course, books. So if your kid's already a reader and they love libraries and bookstores, that's going to draw them in right there. It's very charming. It's very comforting. We are in the land of people who love books as much as we do. It can feel like coming home. The chapter titles are all a snippet from the chapter itself, not what happens, but an actual bit of the language from the chapter. Chapter 1 is The View from the Gate of a Fairground. That's almost more of a hook than that first line is, because it's almost in contradiction with the book. We're like, the view from the gate of a fairground. Like, what does that have to do with what we're reading? And later we find it embedded in the language of the story itself. And I think that little, like, okay, where's the title of the chapter going to be found within the chapter? I think kids would enjoy that as well. I certainly enjoyed that portion of it for about the first third to 2/3 of the book. And then I learned to hate this book. And I stopped enjoying it so much. But we'll talk about that. Part of the reason I stopped enjoying this book is because what's not working about the prose is often the dialogue gets very stilted. It feels forced, especially once it starts being in service of a message of some kind. Once we get to the portion of the book where ideology becomes the main portion, the main point, a lot of the dialogue gets really ham-fisted in there, and it just doesn't feel like it flows, like it's authentic, like it's organic. Let's talk about what's working with the story. The first third of this book is exactly what it promises. It's Tilly. She's got some real-world concerns about losing old friends. They're kind of drifting apart. She feels a little at sea. She's not sure how to reconnect with those friendships, or even if she 100% wants to. And that's something that every kid goes through as they, gain and lose friends over time. That's the sort of personal quandary that a lot of kids will relate to. She also misses her mom. She loves her grandparents. She has a really great life with them, but she does feel the absence of both a mother and a father. That's something that a lot of kids are going to be working through as well. And that first third of the book is all her discovering her magic. It's Anne of Green Gables and Alice in Wonderland randomly showing up in her life, and her being like, but you're really Alice. The actual Alice. And it just seems, she's trying to piece together what exactly is happening with these books that I'm now connecting to in this different way. And what does that mean? And how much of this do my grandparents know about? In terms of story, what's not working? Well, the magic is insanely inconsistent. So when we start delving into the heart of the magic and what the magic of the world is, Amelia, the head librarian, tells Tilly that they don't really know. It's just the magic of books. That's the only magic we have. They kind of manifest their own magic. And then within a number of pages, she is told, once it's delivered, all right, I back up. 2 copies of every book are delivered upstairs to the British Library. 1 goes into their stocks and 1 comes down to us via Julian, the librarian upstairs, whose job it is to liaise between the 2 libraries. Once it's delivered, it's stamped and cataloged as a source, capital S, source, and imbued with the protections and powers of one. Yeah, but how? How do they do that? I thought we didn't know how the magic works. I thought it was just, it's the magic of books and it just shows up and we just try and guard it, protect it as best we can. No, there's magic there that they know how to utilize. Moreover, later on, despite saying that, the magic of books is all we have, except for this magic map room that can go wherever we need it to because plot contrivance. So the magic was never properly sorted out. It wasn't really thought through. And no one at the editing stage was saying, no, really, Anna, we love that this is your first book. It's very clearly a first book. But honey, your magic system has to at least be consistent. We can reveal things and surprise things, but maybe don't have adults outright lying to children if they know how the magic works. They can say things like, it's really complicated. For now, all you need to know, right? We start kids at base level. But we don't lie to them. So right off the get-go, in terms of the inconsistency of the magic, either someone is lying or someone is stupid. And neither of those appeal to me. All of the limits around the magic, too, get immediately violated. Oh, you're going to get stuck in these end pages. Nope, you're just going to walk through to the library. Oh, we can't do this and this with certain books. And then they do. It's wickedly inconsistent. And it's not just about, because here's the thing. Tilly herself is kind of an anomaly, which means you'd think her grandparents, her grandfather having been former head librarian, would have a whole mess of questions about, okay, what can and cannot Tilly do? How is the book wandering going to be different with her because she is inherently different? You'd think they'd be watching her consistently, hawkishly, really interested to see how this is going to work with her. And yet, Grandma and Grandpa are more like, if it happens, it happens. We'll kind of keep an eye on her. They don't seem to have the curiosity and the motivation that the antagonist does, which is bonkers given that they are her grandparents. And if anything, they should be more fiercely protective of her than anything else. And this is another thing that drives me bonkers, is when adults in books, when anyone in a book thinks you can protect someone by giving them less information. That never works. It has never worked. And in fact, some of the best stories ever told were about adults, authority figures, mentors, people in the know, doling out information as it's needed. Like, this is what you need to know right now. And this is what you need to know next. And then you're going to come across this. And if this happens, you come talk to me, right? They are there. They are present. They are informing our protagonist so that our protagonist can be as successful as possible. And that kind of modeling shows us how to be better mentors, how to be better parents and guardians, how to do our job. Because giving children information at the right time, in the right proportions, in the way that's going to work for them without being liars or idiots, is how you raise kids who then grow up to be competent, skillful adults who are also not liars and idiots. Moreover, if these source books, these big first editions that contain all the power and the characters can potentially escape, and so they've got to be really well protected, why are we imbuing them with that power to begin with? If making sure that the stories don't change is so important, why have source books that can be changed at all? Decommission all the source books. Problem solved. Moreover, the flagrant hypocrisy throughout this story. Anna James doesn't actually care about the continuity of characters and books, as she proves with her own story. We'll get to that later. And the pacing is just off. Like I say, the first third is everything we were promised about the book. But then in the second, maybe the first half, maybe we'll be generous, we'll give her the first half of the book is everything we were told it was going to be. Second half of the book just kind of meanders and brings in things that aren't that important to the original story questions. Remember, we start this book with Tilly trying to figure out her friends. We never get back to that. Her old friends she has apparently ghosted in favor of new friend where there isn't really, I don't get that there's a lot of chemistry there. I don't feel her comfort level. I'm told she feels surprisingly comfortable. Again, stilted dialogue, forced tags, that sort of thing. Because, of course, we have to be friends with the new kid, because reasons. But I don't feel it. It doesn't feel authentic. That bond doesn't quite feel right. So when we end the story without her really having figured out what's going on with her old friends, it feels like we miss a story promise completely. The climax portion of the book, when Oscar's mom gets called away to Paris because his Parisian grandmother is now in the hospital, makes no sense. It takes anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours to get from London to Paris. I don't know how many times the trains run a day, but I would imagine it's enough that you could be there and back again in less than 12 hours with ease, regardless of what you had to do in Paris when you got there. Oscar's sister is older than him. He's 11. I think she's either 14 or 15 in the book. Now, if you've got a 2-hour train ride and you know that mom can be waiting on the other end of that train ride, why would you need mom to come get her? If daughter is in the way and dad has to be at the hospital with grandma, because taking a 2-hour train ride means if it was a real emergency, you're not really going to be helpful anyway. That's too much time. But why she has to leave and stay overnight to go get daughter and get her home and out of the way so that dad doesn't have to worry about her so he can focus on grandma. You pack her an overnight bag, you put her on the train, you send her home to mom. There's no reason for mom to leave. This contrivance so that Oscar has to spend the night for some reason is just silly. I don't understand it. It makes no sense in the context of the story, especially given that they are having a party at the bookstore that night. That's the only reason you need for Oscar to be there. And of course, when you're at a neighborhood party, like, kids kind of meander, you know, maybe it's mostly adults, it's mostly booksellers and publishers and that sort of thing. It's Tilly and her friend. So of course they're going to be wandering around. You're not going to see them all of the time. So unless Oscar's mother, like, has him on a leash still at 11, there's no reason to believe they couldn't have just shown up at the party and Oscar and Tilly can go off and do adventuresome things. It's like they needed to pad some stuff in the story. I don't understand it at all. It doesn't make any kind of sense. Now, worst of all, there's mom. We will talk about disappeared mom when we get to character, but let's just say, if her arc made any kind of sense, the story would have been over before it began. It's nonsensical. It angered me. I also don't understand why we are trying to even bring this woman back at this point, because she's clearly terrible, but we'll talk about it when we get to characters. So what's working as far as characters go? Grandma and Grandpa in the first third of the book are delightful. They're everything you want from Grandma and Grandpa running a cozy little outer London bookstore. Grandma's making hot chocolate and Grandpa's making little jokes and asking Tilly about what she's read and how she's doing. They're very involved. They're very attentive, not intentive. They're wonderful. And they're exactly the kind of like cozy, fun, reliable sort of background character that you want to pack a story out with. Okay, let's talk about our antagonist, Enoch Chalk. Enoch Chalk totally works as an antagonist. He is sort of the definition of a lawful evil. If you want to know what a lawful evil alignment character looks like, it's Enoch Chalk. He is a letter of the law guy, even when the letter of the law gets in the way of the spirit. He doesn't care. He has his own motivations, and he believes that he can use the letter of the law to further those aims. He is super creepy, but at the same time, he's not eminently threatening necessarily. We'll talk about some other things, but I think in the beginning, again, first third of the book, Grandma and Grandpa are working as characters. Enoch Chalk as this sinister person in the background, he's working. The Baker Jason, who, brings his pastries to the library or to the bookstore to sell. Our neighbor across the street, all of these things, all of these characters in the beginning, they work. They are everything that we Americans want from our Anglophile type reading. Give me those cute British characters that we know and love. But what's not working is Enoch Chalk as the antagonist. Okay, so to set this up, Tilly does a little bit of breaking and entering into Enoch Chalk's office when she accidentally sends herself back into the library because he's creepy and she doesn't like him and she wants to see what's up. Her reasons for going in there are a little vague and they're not great, but she says there were no photos or knickknacks, no garish best librarian mugs, no sign of personality anywhere. The only decoration was a large poster pinned to the back of the door titled The Ordinances of Bookwandering. As she looked closer, she realized it was handwritten. As her eyes scanned the list, she felt increasingly nervous. These rules were devoid of the sense of adventure or wonder that seemed to fill Amelia or Seb when they talked about bookwandering. 1. Travel within a source edition without prior permission, training, or qualifications is strictly prohibited. Okay, that's exactly what Amelia tells her. Amelia tells her they have to protect the source books, so, okay, great. Everyone's on the same page. 2. Entry to the source library as above. See same. 3. All bookwanderers should be registered immediately after abilities manifest themselves, otherwise traveling will be classed as willfully illicit. Yeah, we gotta know who's wandering around in books, because when you're in the books, another magical inconsistency. When you're in the books, what's happening to you is real. So that makes book wandering dangerous. You can wander into a book where you can really get hurt and bad things can happen. So yeah, you gotta be registered so we know nobody's getting harmed. So far, I'm down with this. Number 4, no book wanderer is permitted within 5 pages of the end of a novel unless trained in end papers travel. Okay, so far, all of these things are about consistency, safety, protecting the sources. I have heard nothing that tells me that any of these rules are ridiculous or over the line or anything like that. But Tilly says the rules went on and on, all seeming to ban something or other. Tilly shuddered and moved over to the shelves of fat ledgers that lined the room. She's scared of rules. She's confused and frightened by the idea that no, we have to have limits and rules so that we can do fun things without people getting, eaten by goblins, murdered by orcs, stepped on by giants. Books are crazy places, right? And in terms of what we've read so far, none of those rules seem out of line. If Enoch Chalk is enforcing a rule structure that hasn't been approved by other people, we don't see what it is. That hasn't been made manifest. So acting like, his rules are scary and bad is just rules are scary and bad, and I don't think that's an appropriate response for anyone. I also think it's a little maybe on the nose to name this character Enoch Chalk, especially given the way chalk is being thrown around at, certain kinds of people these days. That might be a little on the nose. And now we come to it. The bit I've been dragging my feet on. See, one of the things that makes something like homage to characters really work is that it is true and honest to those characters. It praises them as they are. It invokes everything we love about that character, that setting, that place. And one of the really interesting things about fan fiction as a genre is that you are bound by all of the strictures that that previous author put in place. You have to work within their world. You have to stay consistent to their characters, their setting, their world building, but you can create and imagine within those structures. Out and out changing other people's characters, that's a no-no. And it shows total disrespect for those characters and for those stories. Okay, here we go. I just have to read it to you. There's no other way. Grandma reached her arms across the table and took Tilly's hands in hers. Matilda, we've told you that your mom had a special relationship with one particular book, A Little Princess, and that's the truth, but there's more to it. While she was book wandering there, she fell in love with a fictional character and later realized she was going to have a baby. Tilly, you share a dad with Sarah. Your father is Captain Crew. What in the actual, why would you do, what? And that may be how I broke the binding the first time. In order to make this work, Tilly's mother has to be sufficiently delusional that she went into a book, bumped into a fictitious character whose character she knew and understood, disregarded everything else that was going on in the book in order to play the trollop and get it on with a character who that behavior changes his character. Captain Crew is devoted to Sarah's mother and therefore to Sarah. He is a family man. He, especially for the time period, would never engage in extramarital sex, especially if that situation would jeopardize Sarah's well-being. A man at the time simply wouldn't do that, which means either A, this woman went into a book and deliberately seduced a character, was crazy enough to do that. B, married him, which is what we would expect of Captain Crew. We would expect that they would be married. But that means she married him under false pretenses. She doesn't even actually exist in his world. It seems to me that the first time you drop yourself into a book and find yourself having real feels off a fictitious character, you leave. You check yourself. You get out of there, especially knowing that the things that happen to you while you book wander have real consequences. This woman had unprotected sex with a fictitious character, knowing it could have real consequences. The book tries to paint this woman as so selfless. She gave up your father for you because she knew if she ever left the book, it would revert back to the way it was and you would disappear, which is every reason not to have sex with fictitious characters. This woman has proved, though, because her parents say she stayed on in New York after going to college there for an extra year. She was inside a book for a year. They didn't hear from her. They had no communication from her. They didn't get worried. They thought it was normal. They thought it was fine until she showed up pregnant, which makes them terrible parents. They didn't really push her on who the father was until after Tilly was born, but the fact is, if Tilly's mother truly was as selfless as they want to paint her as, she would have stayed in the book and died there. She's already proven that she's willing to abandon her parents. If Tilly really mattered, she would have stayed. She would have lived her whole life there to give Tilly the chance to exist in whatever way she was going to exist in that world. Now, they talk about freedom and choices and how the book dictates the way things are most of the time and how you can't really change it once you're in there. But that goes into complete contradiction with the idea that what's happening to you in the book is real as it is happening. You have the capacity, being a new variable, to change what is going down in there. It's totally contradictory, as is the behavior, as is the idea that there was something moral and good about what this woman did. And that's not the only place this theme pops up. This book tries repeatedly to normalize divorce, to normalize people being out of wedlock when they're having kids, to normalize extramarital sex. All of these things are trying to be normalized in little bits here and there. They scandalize Anne of Green Gables by informing her that Oscar's parents are divorced and that Tilly was born out of wedlock. And they say very dismissively, oh, it just happens more. It's more like that now. I don't care if it's more like that now. It shouldn't be. We know that a two-parent household is best for outcomes for children, period. And we shouldn't be trying to normalize bad adult choices to children. They should not have to accept that their parents are fine, they're good, they're moral even, because they made these choices out of love. And when mom comes back eventually and tries to apologize, she's like, it just happened so fast. You're a lunatic. If it happened too fast for you to, read the last page of the book and get out of Dodge before things got too intense, you're a bad person with a messed up moral compass who then abandoned your daughter in the pursuit of getting back into the book to be with Captain Crew again. This woman is crazy. Her behavior is insane. It had terrible consequences for her daughter, and there's no reason why I would want my 8-year-old reading about this. There's no reason why 8, 9, 10-year-olds should be trying to piece together, well, but how did that work? They were a fictitious character. What happened to make that kid? And then you're having conversations with your kids about, one, how babies are made, whether or not you were ready to have that kind of conversation, especially in the context of a woman who couldn't have enough self-control not to get it on with her own imagination. Okay, I'm being summoned, apparently. Sorry for that, but in case you can't guess, this book gets an Insidious. They wrapped it up in all of the pretty things. They stole our favorite characters and they are using it to push an agenda that is anti-family, that is anti-marriage, and that is intersectionally feminist throughout, but I won't bother you with that now. Frankly, that's all I've got for today. If you've got a book you want to see the Story Serpent take on, feel free to put it in the comments. Until we meet again, read on, write on, stay sharp.